As the window for public comment on the Public Procurement Bill draws to a close, stakeholders are calling for critical issues within the draft legislation to be addressed. The bill seeks to establish a single framework to regulate public procurement by all organs of state. Corruption Watch legal researcher Motlatsi Komote joins us now to talk about this. Good evening and welcome to you, Motlatsi. The last thing, of course, anyone in this country wants is to hear that we don't have sufficient methods to prevent tender corruption after the scars of state capture. What's the problem with this bill as it stands?
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me, Bongiwe and Imani. Well, we as Corruption Watch think that, firstly, we welcome the establishment of this bill. We think it's a long time coming. It's been about 10 years since we've had these conversations about having a public procurement bill. Currently, we have fragmented legislation, and so that's created quite a lot of confusion. And so we really welcome the fact that this is now being undertaken by government. However, there's some key concerns that we have as Corruption Watch in particular around this public procurement bill. One of that being that, for example, the bill will establish what is known as the PPO or Public Procurement Office. And one of the things that we've really called for as Corruption Watch is that this office should be independent of National Treasury, in particular because we think that those who are performing oversight and those who are actually undertaking procurement should not be the same people. And so we're really calling for an independent body to be established instead of it being housed within National Treasury like the OCPO currently is. That's the first one. The second one is around the fact that we have concerns around access to procurement processes. So currently, as a member of the public, to some extent, you do not have access to information. And when you do want access to information, you have to put in prior applications, which are quite cumbersome and they take quite a lot of work and time. And so we believe that members of the public should be able to some extent, access procurement information even more. And in fact, we've made a recommendation that there is an alternative mechanism for really getting a rapid exchange of information. And so those are some of the things. And then the bill itself really wants to establish a tribunal. Part of our concerns around this tribunal is that it really seems throughout the bill, in fact, to really provide a centralization of power in the minister. And so we're hearing what's happening with the Post Bank and the fact that board members have actually left the Post Bank, and we can see that there's ministerial interference. And so we as Corruption Watch are really saying that we need to really limit the powers of the minister in terms of appointing and terminating the tenure of those members of the tribunal. Currently, as it stands, the big issue that we have is that members of this tribunal would be hired by the minister, and their terms would be terminated by the minister. This would be done solely by the minister, and we are calling for some kind of appointment committee similar to what we're seeing with Chapter 9 institutions, for example. Yeah. And so there's quite a lot around transparency and accountability and really ensuring that the procurement system that we have in place is going to be an effective one. And so we've raised our concerns around really...
May I just come in there really quickly, Motlatsi? Thank you so much. I think that you've shared quite a few important attributes that you would like this bill or potential defects that you would like this bill to circumvent. You mentioned the issue of Postbank. And when you look at the grant payment failures at Postbank and some of the problems that were relating to procurement there, could it be that this piece of legislation would be effective in that sort of situation to kind of red flag and circumvent deficient or potentially deficient suppliers entering the system and providing a service that has a massive socio-economic effect?
So that's what we're actually hoping for. So, I mean, as part of this bill, there would be an established department register, and we're hoping that, and one of the things that we've said as Corruption Watch and many other civil society organizations is that people who are suppliers who've been debarred, access to this information should be made available to us. They should be put on this register quite timeously, because sometimes what happens is that people who are restricted suppliers or people who have been debarred are not necessarily put on the register as quickly as they should. And so we're really calling for more effective measures and more capacitation in that regard. So we think that hopefully this would solve the current issues that we are seeing and that we have with what we're seeing at the Post Bank, for example.
I mean, critically, we carry stories on the SABC every single night about service providers that either abandon the job after they've actually, if you look historically, have been found to be defective service providers in jobs already in the system. It should have been there, it should have been open. And the other gripe, of course, is that people who legitimately put their tenders forward and at great cost and effort don't get the tender and want to know why, and they don't often have that opportunity to have a recourse. Just a quick final word as we end this. Systematic corruption is enabled by, improperly procured goods and services. What is its effect on democracy?
So as we're seeing now, corruption really affects our democracy insofar as us not being able to really realize our socioeconomic rights. As we're seeing with the Post Bank, something as simple as ensuring that you have the right procurer and the right supplier either could mean that people either get their grants or they don't. So it really has a negative impact, and it really takes us many steps back in terms of us being able to ensure that the people who live in South Africa are able to really realize their rights and make use of the services, both in the health, education, and other sectors.
Thank you so much for talking to us tonight. We appreciate your time. That was Corruption Watch legal researcher, Motlatsi Komote.